Hi, and welcome to Total Recall. Today we're going to talk about the filmography of Martin Scorsese. Before we do, I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics.
And I'm Matt Zeoli.
And I just started a Patreon, so you can check that out on patreon.com. Just search Tom, Scioli.
And I have a new album out called Around Forever under the moniker Santa Mira Video, and you can check that out at santamiravideo.bandcamp.com to listen and download.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli.
You can follow me on Instagram at cinema_tomb.
And you can follow the show on Twitter at Total Recall Show or on Instagram at Total_Recall_show. Martin Scorsese, the king of the movies. I don't know what's his moniker. Does he have
the De Niro Wrangler?
Okay, yeah. I thought you were going to say the De Niro of directors.
He's the Joe Pesci of directors.
He's the De Niro of movies.
The DiCaprio whisperer. You can't think of the movies without Scorsese. What a filmography.
Yeah.
More than 10 films. He's installed
right.
after his 10, so he's making some great flicks.
Yeah, and I mean, we could start with The Irishman. Maybe start with the most recent, work our way back. No, it was kind of a portent of things to come, because it was like, came out in the theater and then on Netflix not too long after it was in the theater.
I know that it was a big deal because it was like one of the most expensive, like most money Netflix might have given a director.
Yeah, and now that's just kind of where we're at with movies. Like Wonder Woman, like a big superhero blockbuster is going to be premiering on a streaming service. So it's getting a simultaneous theatrical and HBO Max release.
Oh wow!
Like The Irishman, but it was kind of like, because I love the movies. Like I love going to the movies, going to a theater. I love that theatrical experience. I really connect with the movie when I see it in that setting in a way that I don't.
Yeah, it like drowns out your other senses.
Yes, yeah.
And it like, makes you focus on what's on the screen. Even if like, I know back, at the dawn of the decline of the theater, everyone's like, I've got a home theater system in my house. Even then, you can't replicate the theater.
Yeah, it doesn't do it. So like The Irishman, even though like I could have it was on Netflix. And I could have just stayed at home and watched. I was like, no, I want to see it in the theater because it's a Scorsese. Like, I've seen a lot of Scorsese movies in the theater, but it's like, I haven't seen all of them in the theater. Like I was just a little kid when Goodfellas came out. I wouldn't have been interested in it anyway. At that age.
Irishman looks like a movie.
Yeah, it was interesting, like having that experience, because it like we saw The Irishman, and then when I got home, I wanted to watch it again, and I watched it again immediately. And that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool, being able to see something in the movies, come home, and then immediately watch it again.
That is so sweet.
Yeah, and it was like a whole other experience. When else in history would you be able to do that? It's we're in a new era.
Yeah, like watching some of the old. We were watching some the old horror films and like slasher flicks and stuff, and it's like, oh yeah. I remember when YouTube didn't exist, you had to put 20 minutes of reviewing the facts at the beginning of the movie just to remind people what the heck is going on. It's like they didn't have access to this stuff immediately.
Like the closest thing would have been like if you went to the movies, and then after the movie's over, you just kind of like put your hat down and like let the clean up and stuff, and then like sit there and then watch the next show. That would be like the closest thing. The Irishman had a different title, like. Scorsese wanted to call it I Hear You Paint Houses.
I Heard You Paint Houses. Yeah, that was
You Paint Houses.
The title of the book it was based off of.
Yeah, and obviously, like, that's cool. That was the title he wanted. And then I guess Netflix was like, look, we want, that's a little too esoteric. We want people to know this is a mob movie. Yeah. When you see the movie, nowhere in the movie, like maybe the end credits or something, I don't know, but like, It doesn't say The Irishman. You watch it and it says, I hear you paint houses. I didn't see the word Irishman anywhere. So it's like, Scorsese got his way. He's like, okay, we'll call it The Irishman. So like when you pull it up on Netflix, it says The Irishman. But if you sit down in the theater and watch this movie, you're seeing I Hear You Paint Houses.
Least common denominator titles, they're reducing. It's like, I'm going to see upset dudes or whatever, or like I'm seeing angry grandparents.
Yeah, right. Grumpy old mobsters.
I
enjoyed it so much, but my recall of it is kind of being drowned out by like how bad it got dunked on. It's because the big thing people dunked on was the CGI de-aging.
Yeah.
You know, which I think was probably just like Scorsese was probably just like, oh, it would be fun to play with that.
Yeah.
You know, because I feel like he could have made a different movie. Like he could have told the same story without that. Like, okay, so like they're old guys.
I didn't think it looked bad.
I like to go into these things cold. So like I didn't know a thing about. I just knew new Scorsese movie. I'm there. Like I didn't know anything about it. Tom Sharpling said that the the de-aged CGI Robert De Niro in the flashbacks looked like the child of Alec Baldwin and Robin Williams. So like that's the and it's
troubling.
like so that's spot on.
You can't unsee it.
Ever since I heard that, when I go back to rewatch the movie, I'd hear him say, "Nanu."
You know what?
Also, like, I didn't realize going into, and I think this was good. Like, I didn't know that we were getting like the Jimmy Hoffa story. Like, it's kind of like this like central, like I'd call it a myth or whatever, you know, because of like how large it is in this sort of like mafia movie milieu. But like to tell the Jimmy Hoffa story, that's like going straight to the source because he kind of like he references it in some of his other movies. He touches on it and then maybe has like some Jimmy Hoffa-esque situations and things like that. But it's like he's going straight to the source on this one and like doing his take on it.
And it was like, wow, it feels like it's been a long time coming for Scorsese.
Yeah, so that was like a really nice surprise where it's kind of like, you know, when like the Sixth Sense or whatever, where like you think you're watching one movie and then it's kind of like you realize, oh wait, I'm watching, you know, something altogether different.
There was, you know, rumors and stuff he was buried in like the end zone at like the Jets stadium and stuff, and that he was in like the Everglades.
That's what's like implied in movies like Casino or Goodfellas or whatever, where they have to like get rid of a body.
Yeah, like in Casino, they're out in the cornfield.
Yeah, they're in the cornfield, and then there's also like, you know, the desert where they have all the holes already dug.
Oh, I know. I'm always on the lookout. There's always plastic down and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
right, yeah.
No one seems to know when they're like walking into like a situation.
Yeah.
It's like, hey guys, what's all the plastic for?
Having to dispose of a body and make it like that. That seems like very Hitchcock. Like that must be where Scorsese got that tick from.
He loves Hitchcock, and like Cape Fear is like his like big like take on him.
Yeah, Cape Fear's an interesting one. Like Scorsese kind of like, you know, like figuring himself out. Like it kind of took a while for us to get to like the mature Scorsese, even though, you know, like something like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, they were like relatively early.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, when you think of Scorsese, you do kind of think of like the like Goodfellas, Casino, like that kind of thing, and like Cape Fear was like, you know, like another like twist in the road. Like he does do these kind of like unexpected things, and like just looking at his filmography, it's like all these different genres and all these different like types of movies.
I love it, and like there's something for everyone in his filmography, and Cape Fear was it was a Steven Spielberg movie originally. Okay. He like prepped it and everything, and then like they traded rights. Like Scorsese had the rights to Schindler's List, and they like did a swap.
Okay.
So like Spielberg prepped it, and then I think he produced it, but he didn't put his name. Like he thought like for the like the content and stuff, he didn't like wasn't listed.
I guess because he was still kind of like you know, like the family friendly kind of guy or something. Yeah.
He was still trying to, you know, go down that route.
You know, it's such like sort of a played up thing, but it's like where Scorsese said like, oh, it's one for you, one for me. Where it's like, okay, I do one movie and it's like what I love and what I really want to do, and then I do another movie and that's just, you know, for the studio to get a couple quick bucks.
Yeah.
And then I go back to my, you know, go back and forth. So, but I don't know how like blown up, like if maybe that's just something he kind of said one time. But I do kind of like look at his body of work where it's like, okay, is this a one for you or is this a one for me? And like Cape Fear is like so like firmly and strongly like entrenched in genre. Like it's his like most like, okay, I'm doing a thriller, you know, an old school thriller.
It has like insanely good performances in it. Like Robert De Niro is like terrifying, and and Nick Nolte and Jessica Lange and Juliette Lewis, they're all killer in it, and yeah, it is definitely Hitchcock. Like I think he had the like the opening credits, or even like Hitchcock's guy did like the opening credits for it.
Yeah.
And the score, Bernard Herrmann did the score, and yeah, it's so good.
When the movie starts, Robert De Niro, like in his prison cell, he has like a comic page hanging up to kind of inspire him, and that's like and I liked the choice of character. It's Black Bolt, who's one of the Inhumans. It's like a Jack Kirby, Stan Lee character. And I really like it. Was like a pretty deep cut, you know, especially like back then. It was a really deep cut. It wasn't a Jack Kirby drawing, but just like I like that they picked Black Bolt. I like when Black Bolt gets some shine because he does because also like when Gene Simmons talks about like the inspiration for his persona, the demon in Kiss. He says that like Black Bolt was like the inspiration. Wow. So like I like you know, Black Bolt. You know, this obscure Kirby creation kind of has its place in the larger pop culture.
Secretly, like big, like influence, big mover and shaker behind the scenes.
Yeah, I want like because it's like, you know, you could imagine him picking like, you know, Superman or the Hulk or something. So it's kind of cool picking an obscure one like that.
My granny drank strychnine and Daddy handled snakes in church, and like the flares like melting on his hand, and I'm like, oh my god.
Did you ever watch the Robert Mitchum Cape Fear?
I've never seen that.
Yeah, I haven't either.
I know those guys, Robert Mitchum, Gregory Peck, and Martin Balsam. They had cameos in Cape Fear, so that was cool that Scorsese like pulled.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, that's so sweet.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, like we keep referencing, it's like when you have Lou Ferrigno in Ang Lee's Hulk, you know.
Yeah.
First Scorsese movie I saw in the theater was Casino, because I was like the right age, because like Scorsese, like maybe it's different now, but it's like he was like a director who like you don't get into when you're a kid, like, you know, like Spielberg, you know, you're a kid, like this was before you know, before he you know made a couple kids movies. So it's like, you know, it was just like, okay, that, like even Cape Fear, I was kind of like, okay, that's a grown-up movie. Goodfellas, yeah, that's a grown-up movie. But then, you know, I was a little bit older when Casino came out, so it was like I saw that in the theater, and just like I was entranced. Like I was fully on board. Like from that like first, you know, kind of like pre-credit sequence, you know, where he like gets in the car, turns the thing, you know, and the car blows up. Mafia movie trope. You know?
The old car bomb, like, would you mind starting my car?
and it's got the thing of like Sunset Boulevard, where it's like, you know, the dead guy is gonna narrate the story. Like, here's me dying, here's me blowing up in a car, and going to hell, basically. Like that whole opening credits montage. It's like Las Vegas as hell. Like this is where, you know, as he's like flipping through the air being exploded. And you assume the story's being told by like a dead man, guy. You know, and then you got the little twist.
Sharon Stone, great performance. I think she might have been Oscar nominated for that. And you're right. I'm trying to think through his filmography. Like Goodfellas, that might have been the first one I was like exposed to, because my cousins watched that all the time. They like watch like the Josie Wales movie, like the Clint Eastwood movies. They would play like they're obsessed with Goodfellas. So that was kind of like. But Casino was the one where I was probably in like early middle school, so I would be like, you know, I got the full trailers and like the full promotion for it.
Yeah. You were like ready for it.
I was ready for it. And I think I eventually like we had like rented it or something. I saw it on VHS.
After I saw Casino, it was like, okay, I'm gonna explore this guy's back catalog. Siskel and Ebert. I don't think it was like one of their regular episodes where they're just review. I think it was like one of their episodes where they're like, you know, where it would be like a theme or whatever. They talk about like maybe the year's best movies or whatever. And like they were talking about the steady cam shot in Goodfellas, where like they're walking through the kitchen.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal because it was like, oh, there's this new technology that allows you to like walk, you know, downstairs and through a corridor and up without the camera, you know, being all, you know, bobbing and weaving.
I'm so glad you're Siskel. Like what? Like I would love to. I love to put on Siskel and Ebert. It would come on like it seemed like it come on like midnight or something.
Yeah.
Or like 11:30, and like I I love it. I loved it so much. They would like, they do their intro, got me excited because they're up on the balcony, and then it shows like the movie down there, like still, and then they're like, they both turn to the screen, and then it plays like whatever clip they decided to play gets me pumped up. Man, and I still watch them on YouTube. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, I loved Siskel and Ebert, and like now that you mention it, it makes me kind of think because like that was the job I wanted. Like I wanted to be, and in a way, like that's kind of what we've created here.
Yeah, like I just wanted to talk to my friend here and
talk about movies and be the authority, because it's like, okay, the guy who made the movie like did all this work, all this like blood, sweat, and tears, but it's like, okay, that's all well and good, but now I'm gonna have the final say on whether this movie's worth a damn or not.
It's like,
I could sort of sit back.
Wanted to talk about movies with my friend, then we both like like the camera.
But also, I mean, I wasn't as tuned into this as a kid, but it's like as I got older, started to realize like the adversarial relationship between Siskel and Ebert, that they're actually not friends at all. They're almost like forced to be, on that in that aisle. They couldn't stand each other. They hated each other, and they were rivals. They were rival papers at rival newspapers in Chicago. And then I think Ebert hated Siskel more than Siskel hated Ebert, because Siskel was just kind of like had this attitude towards like the world, but Ebert felt like he like that Siskel wasn't even in his class, that like because they came from two different backgrounds. And Ebert felt that Ebert came from like a journalistic background and stuff, and he felt like he had the credentials, and the fact that he's paired up with this Johnny Come Lately,
I love it. Like, I always felt that Ebert was unnecessarily tough on horror movies.
Okay, yeah, I mean they both sort of Siskel was sort of like the one who could like unselfconsciously embrace trashy movies, where Ebert was like maybe the more snobby one. Siskel like his favorite movie was Saturday Night Fever, and he owned the John Travolta like Saturday Night Fever outfit. Like he bought that in like an auction or whatever, and probably like wore it around his house. That was like a gateway to like movies and movie analysis and criticism. And
Pauline Kael, and I think she championed. I know Ebert championed Scorsese too, but I don't know how she was on. There was a rumor like how tough she was on like George Lucas and stuff. So there was a rumor that the bad guy in Willow is like named after like Pauline Kael.
Yeah, it sounds like she didn't like. Here's the shots fired or whatever. But it's like, if you grew up with Star Wars, it's like, Star Wars, it's like the greatest thing ever. Yeah. But if you didn't, it's like, okay, why are we making a movie for children about mass murder? About like, okay, here's a thing with thousands of people in it, and I'm gonna blow it up. That's kind of it seemed kind of irresponsible. Scorsese, in the context of that generation that he was part of, with Lucas and Spielberg, and then Coppola was kind of like the big brother, the older, more experienced guy. Part of
the the new Hollywood crew. I love that whole era, and like that's awesome. And
like I think of them as all kind of like, it's this group of geniuses, and they all hang out, and they all But it's like, you go back in time, and it's like Scorsese was struggling. In those kind of early days, it was kind of like, we're trying this, we're trying that, and like, you had like, New York, the musical that was kind of like a flop.
Yeah, and, De Niro and Minnelli.
Yeah, and then, King of Comedy, again, like King of Comedy, it's a classic. You think of it as, but yeah, it flopped. After Hours, I think, didn't do so great either.
Yeah, that was another one. Color Money might have been a hit.
Color Money was huge.
That was a hit.
It was a huge hit, and like I only watched that for the first time recently because I never knew that was a Scorsese movie. Like I remember when I was a kid seeing that movie was everywhere, and again like I had no interest in it because it looked like it was a movie for grown-ups. Most of my understanding of The Color of Money was from like Ben Stiller's spoof of it called The Hustler of Money, where he's like a bowling hustler. He dances around with bowling balls the way Tom Cruise would dance around with pool cues, and he'd walk around with like that black shirt that said like Vince on it.
I love it.
And I assumed like, well, that can't be really in the movie. That's got to be something made up for this. But that is in the movie.
When I attempt to do a Tom Cruise impression, it's Ben Stiller's impression of Tom Cruise. It's like, this guy? Who is this guy? Like,
yeah, it was kind of like the perfect thing because like he was like the right age and kind of, and there was enough of a resemblance that I feel like that. I mean, that's where Ben Stiller kind of entered the scene was with that spoof. Like they played it a million times on Saturday Night Live back then. So like I knew that like so I think Jerry Stiller was in it.
Oh
like
my
I think
God.
Jerry Stiller played the Paul Newman character.
oh my God.
But so like I just had it dismissed as like just one of those like bad 80s movies that like everybody loved and whatever. And then recently learned it was a Scorsese movie, so I'm like, okay, I gotta watch that. So I watched it, and it was really good. And it was like you could see like, okay, this is full gloss. This like I don't know if this is a one for you, one for me, but Scorsese was going for like a hit with it, and it like very 80s, very glossy, and like just high octane, gives you everything you're looking for. And then and even the music, like it's like Phil Collins music, so it's kind of like, okay, that's like the 80s high gloss big hit music to go with the 80s high gloss big hit movie.
And then the poster, I mean, it's huge hit. Like you got Newman and Cruise, like taking up pretty much the whole poster.
And a sequel, like the only sequel that Scorsese ever did.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, what was the Hustler? Was that
the original one? An interesting idea. Kind of like The Force Awakens or something, where it's like, okay, we got this new generation of kids, and then we got the old, like Tom Cruise is like super young in it, and he's playing like a John Travolta character. He's like where John Travolta was maybe like a little like. It feels like it was written for John Travolta, but it was just like a couple years too late. So you get Tom Cruise, and he's like super dumb. He's got like big hair, and he's all like all teeth, and smiles, and like and and it is kind of cool because it's like, and they talk about him like he's a racehorse, like he's like just like this like animal that like they're gonna make money off of, like very early on, Paul Newman, who's like the former pool hustler, and then. Tom Cruise's girlfriend, like they get together and they're kind of like, okay, we got a gold mine here, but we gotta like play this guy the right way because he's very raw and we're smart and he's dumb and we gotta
I love it too when something like that it focuses on like like pool. It's like billiards, like it's not the most popular thing in the world, so it's or like over the top, like
arm wrestling.
Arm wrestling, it's like he's the best frisbee golfer around.
Well, you see, like kind of like an early version of some of the stuff you're gonna see in like Goodfellas, where like like it feels like his voice really emerges with Goodfellas. Maybe Raging Bull. Maybe his voice emerges in Raging Bull. Like, with The Color of Money, like relating it to Goodfellas, you see kind of like him trying out some techniques in Color of Money that like are flashy but aren't quite, are kind of like, there's so many like zooms in Color of Money. There's like all these scenes where like somebody's talking and then the camera like zooms in and then somebody's doing it and the camera zooms in and it's like really cool and fun to watch, but it's like kind of like a little showy. It kind of takes you out of it a little bit. Then in like, Goodfellas, he kind of like employs those things a little more strategically. He doesn't just like throw them in everywhere.
More targeted,
yeah. And then like another thing in Color of Money is like you're saying about Poole as like an interesting choice, but he's like he figures out ways to bring out like the sensory like flavors of pool, like the pleasures of pool, where it's like there's all these scenes where it's like a macro lens or whatever, seeing like these billiard balls hitting each other and making this like really cool sound and like and seeing like kind of like Raging Bull, the way you'd see like sweat or blood fly off in slow motion. You'd see like the powder,
I love it,
blowing off as like the cue hits it, and then he'd like there'd be like interesting editing and speeding up and slowing down, where like, you know, you get sort of like the music of Poole.
He seems to always come up with like interesting shots that he may have not seen in his previous films. Like he's always pushing the envelope and like trying to like pull something out of his like bag of his tool bag.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just he's constantly expanding that you know, bag of tricks. And Bringing Out the Dead, one of the things in there, it kind of reminded me of Gangs of New York, where it's like you have these scenes, like Bringing Out the Dead, it's kind of like Taxi Driver. It's like, you know, how much of this is imagined, how much of this is real, and you get this like blurring between like, you know, your dream life and like real life. And so there'd be these scenes in Bringing Out the Dead where it's like, you know, it's like surrealist, where it's like, you know, a bunch of like people in various states of undress and like bloodied, and then there's like a horse walking around in the middle of New York, and it's like, what am I seeing here? Is this somebody's dream? But it's like, no, Gangs of New York was kind of like that too, because like I mean, the big thing I think of is that like first scene in Gangs of New York where they're in like a cave, or it looks like druids in a cave in like, you know, the year 400 or whatever, and they're like playing their like war drums and the, you know, all this stuff, and it, you know, it looks like you're like in Ireland or something, like in this, you know, in the Middle Ages or something, and then they come out the door and they're like in New York. It's like, whoa, you know, what did I just see? Yeah, but it's all like, you know, grounded, you know, and it like just gives you like a new perspective on, you know, things that you took for granted. Like I would assume, you know, okay, Gangs of New York or whatever, you're gonna see a bunch of guys going, you know, yeah, see, you know, you're gonna see, you know, but it's like it's like, you know,
you killed my brother.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, you know, it kind of takes you on this, you know, in places like you didn't think you'd go, you know, like you realize how much of like, you know, of like America was kind of just, you know, like they talk about like the melting pot or whatever, where it's like just, it's like the old country, you know, all these like little patches of the old country in this new context, and kind of like smashed together in this like sort of geographically, you know, limited area where it's like, okay, there's water over here, and then Wall Street, like the wall, like Wall Street literally has a wall that is, you know, creating this like literal barrier, you know.
Yeah, it's like no escape.
Mm-hmm. You know, with all his sort of like, you know, mafia movies, it's kind of like, okay, you're seeing like this is like the origin story, or this is like the prehistory of it.
He does in so many of his films. He must love the crime genre.
Yeah. His origin story, you know, is like he's kind of this sickly kid who's kind of looking out his window and seeing, you know, sort of like, you know, gang activity and whatnot, you know, in his neighborhood, and kind of like having enough of an eye on it, but having like that remove from it a little bit.
Yeah,
too.
it's like he seems to be obsessed with the mafia and like Catholicism.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's like, okay, he's Italian, you know, or you know, and he grew up in like a Catholic context, so like, yeah, these things, you know, kind of speak to him. This idea of like mythologizing like your background. So like, it's like, okay, I'm Italian, I'm Catholic, so here's like the mythology of that, you know, which would be like, you know, these mafia characters. If you went far enough back in the past, it would be like, you know, the Roman Empire or whatever.
Yeah.
And you know, when he was a kid, like he was like really into those like sword and sandal epics, you know, of like the 50s and 60s, and he made like this comic where it was like a storyboard for like a movie he wanted to make, beautifully drawn.
Oh, that's awesome.
Where it was like that, it was one of the, like all this pageantry and like the Roman Empire, and you know, he could have like looking at it. He could have been like a talented like comics creator.
I know.
If he sort of gave up, you know, the money, fame, and prestige of being like a celebrated director, and instead, you know, went into comics. You know. Yeah, I mean, he has a voice, and it's like, right, you know, and like and Mean Streets. You know, it's far from my favorite Scorsese, but you could tell like there's something there for sure. Like you see it. It's kind of interesting what you can accomplish in art if you just like go for it. If you like this if you just have sort of a singular focus. So like the singular focus of like the Travis Bickle character, but then like applying that to film, like creating this like singularly focused movie where you're making like no concessions to anything but this story. You can like really create something like intense and singular and unforgettable.
In Who's Knocking at My Door, you got Harvey Keitel as longtime collaborator in there, and what the heck? Once again, he's got the X factor again, and he's got talent.
Yeah,
and he's right out of the gate. I'm like, this guy is a star.
Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Like Harvey Keitel in that.
Yeah.
Like he's in that movie for like maybe like 3 minutes of screen time, and he's like the thing you remember from that movie. Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore is like an interesting one. That's another one I saw for the first time relatively recently, and just like loved it. And it's like it's like this it's like the Odyssey or something. It's just like adventure where it's like very episodic and like, okay, here's this crazy stuff happening here, and here's this crazy
It's been a while since I've seen that one. I think it was been on television or something, like back in the day, like on Fox 53 or something.
Okay. Like I never came across it. Like my main connection to it was the TV show Alice. Like I loved the TV show Alice, and I'd always heard that it was based on this movie.
Yeah.
Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And there's like in the opening credits of Alice, there's like 1 or 2 shots.
I've never watched Alice.
Like I loved Alice, so it's like, okay, there's and then watching Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore many years later, it's kind of like like growing up watching the TV show MASH and then seeing the movie MASH. It's like wow, they're cursing in this, and Harvey Keitel's in this. What's Harvey Keitel? And it's like super into. And there's like Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. It's like funny, it's tragic, it's scary. It's got all these twists and turns. And then the part that inspired the TV show Alice is like it's a very like memorable and very cool and very fun part of the movie where like she eventually kind of like finds her like after all this sort of trying to figure herself out and what her life is, she like kind of finds a place, a home in this like diner, and it is like a really fun scene, and the character Flo. So like Diane Ladd plays Flo, and like when she shows up, it is kind of like, oh, this character's really a lot of fun. And then Mel, the guy who owns the diner, like screaming at everybody. It's like a fun dynamic.
With Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, I would always forget about that. It, like every year near the Oscars, I like go back through and like I want to see who was nominated for the Best Actress in 1970. I just go through the list, and then I'm like, oh yeah, Ellen Burstyn was nominated for Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Yeah, well, like that's the thing with like Scorsese, like you're kind of like aware of all the movies that beat him in the Oscars. Yeah, the year Goodfellas came out, like I think it was Dances with Wolves won the Oscars. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, like
but I know it's always this like always a bridesmaid, never a bride kind of thing.
Yeah, Costner was like his first nomination, and he walks away the winner. It's always like some movie that no one talks about. Like
because it probably like maybe captured the moment. Maybe that spoke to what was going on in like in 1980 or whatever. But it's not. These things are subjective and ultimately mean nothing. But we still talk about them. And Braveheart beats Casino. So it's kind of like he got beaten by like another Dances with Wolves, I guess I gotta make a movie with like a bunch of people wearing some kind of crazy costume and like and then he does Gangs of New York. Maybe that was the thinking. It's like, okay, I gotta do my Braveheart, and it's gonna be Gangs of New York. Like at what point did he finally like break the?
I think it was The Departed.
The Departed.
In 2006 is when he won Best Picture, I think.
Yeah, Departed. That was a fun movie too. That was pretty great.
I can't believe it took him that long.
It happens. It happens. Yeah.
Or the fact that he was able to keep making like Oscar nominated movies. Like,
I think having like Jack Nicholson in it helps.
Yeah.
I think some of these winners have Jack Nicholson in them.
We love Jack. He's a stalwart of the Total Recall show. He's like, Leo, I'm gonna bash your cast with my shoe here. Are you wearing a wire?
The Dark Mirror, kind of two guys like come in, like kind of like the same but opposite, kind of coming in. And
Damon and DiCaprio.
Yeah.
Mark Wahlberg. They're like, okay, you've been trying to fight back that Boston accent. They're like, unleash Boston. It's like Boston accent activate.
I love these like deep undercover movies where like it's like you start you kind of go a little nuts and you're like not even sure who you are for a while, and then all the like DiCaprio just gets the raw end of everything, because it's like he's doing the right thing and he's doing good, but he gets the world views him as like
you're
a piece of crap, like a scumbag or whatever.
Some shocking turns of events in that one.
Yeah, and then like the worst of the worst, but gets to like enjoy all the fruits of like everything that the world has to offer, and is like admired and it's super. It's almost like a fable or something.
I love Shutter Island.
Yeah, Shutter Island. Like that's another one.
Huge fan of that.
Kind of like Cape Fear. It's like very genre. It's got I had a great time watching it, and I've watched it like a few times since. I really enjoyed it, but it is like I like it's like those are kind of like
it's fluffy.
Yeah, it's fluff. Yeah, kind of it hits a certain it like hits a certain spot. Those ones aren't like as timeless as
Yeah, like
when he like
Taxi.
It's strange to say this, but it's like when Scorsese's more sort of like naturalistic. Those are like the ones that are kind of
like
for somebody who's so stylish to say naturalistic is kind of strange, but it is like Shutter Island or Cape Fear they're like histrionic. They're like they're almost like gothic. Yeah,
you'd see Shutter Island like if you go in like a weird VHS, like a video rental place. You would be like that would be on like the video vault or something.
Right? Yeah. It would be like, oh, I'm looking for like a cool thriller. Okay, yeah. Here's Shutter Island. It's very like Grindhouse or whatever.
Wolf of Wall Street was and he did Hugo too.
Yeah, Hugo was like, okay, I'm going to do a kids movie. So that's the Scorsese starter pack. Yeah. And again, it is like he gets to do these like very personal movies. Like he just loves film and he loves the history of film. So it's like you'd see the trailers for Hugo and you're like, oh, it's like a magical robot movie something, and then you watch it and it's like, oh no, this is about like the dawn of film. This is about like a trip to the moon or what, these like early the first movies.
Wolf of Wall Street. I love that one. That's a.
It's I mean that one is like it's cut from the same cloth as Goodfellas, where it's like, okay, we are going to delight in the story of like people being bad and loving it, sort of sociopaths. We're going to delight in that. Wolf of Wall Street was kind of rough for me. It was like I couldn't get into it because it was like like I could I could feel the consequences of the actions just because like we'd just the whole financial collapse and everything was so recent and so like devastating for so many people. It's like I couldn't just be like, oh, let's have some fun watching people destroy people's savings and kick people out of their homes, and it was that like I could it's kind of like it's sort of the same thing almost like with Goodfellas, where it's like when you're a certain age, you don't really understand like consequences and like the real world. So it's like you can just kind of watch like there's like an age where you can watch Goodfellas and just be like, just like enjoy seeing people doing bad things and getting away with it and stuff.
Man, I love when they murder people in cold blood.
Exactly. Yeah, like just kind of like, oh, you disrespected me, I'm going to shoot you in the face. Like that kind of stuff is there's certain like immaturity that you can have to kind of like enjoy those things. But then you get to a certain age, and it's like you think about the real world consequences, and it is like watching Goodfellas, even though it's a movie, it's fake, it's make believe, based on this very like hyperbolic, how much is real and how much is like bullshit book, by Henry Hill, but still it is kind of like, it is like, like this, like a version of this like people really did get sort of, killed, and this, so it's kind of like, oh, this isn't fun,
What does put Wolf of Wall Street like lower in the canon for me is what you're saying, like they're trying to like Goodfellas. I didn't even put that together. Like Goodfellas eyes, like what they're doing in Wolf of Wall Street.
They like he does that a little bit in Casino too, where he's like, okay, here's all this stuff that's going on in Casino, and then here's how it affected all of us. Like here, but again, it's like I was removed from, like, it's like maybe if you were like an adult in the 80s and experienced like, the savings and loan collapse, and maybe if that like adversely affected your life, you'd have one perspective, but it was like, okay, that was like ancient history to me, but it's like, the Wolf of Wall Street stuff, it's like, okay, this is fresh.
2013 is when that came out. It's good to be bad.
It was kind of, it was giving me like a minor panic attack watching it. King of Comedy, that's one where it's like, just a blip in terms of like when it came out and stuff, but then like if you're a fan of Scorsese, it's like, oh, King of Comedy, that's like one of the greats,
Yeah, like that one is one I saw within the last like couple years. That was like one of the most ones I saw recently, and I love that one so much.
So fun, so like it's really funny, and I think that was like one of the criticisms of the movie when it came out, was like, hey, it's called The King of Comedy, it's not very funny. I'm not like, but like, it's like, because now we understand like the Scorsese like dark humor, and like it's hilarious.
It really is, and like the tone of it, and
and Jerry Lewis playing himself. Like, it's so fun watching it, because like all the stories you hear about Jerry Lewis, it's like when they show up at his house, it's like Jerry Lewis is just like he's not even acting at that point. Like maybe they shot that first and just had them show up at Jerry Lewis's house for real. Like Jerry Lewis, I can't believe he allowed himself to be shown like
in that light,
in such a raw form, like that. That felt real. That felt like, okay, this is really Jerry Lewis. Having none of it. Like, it's humorless.
He wanted Rupert wanted to, he wanted to have a platform for his set. He's like, it's better to be king for a day than schmuck for a lifetime or something.
Yeah, it's the first time I saw it, like, I thought, like, okay, he meets Jerry Langford backstage, and then the next scene is like a flash forward. Now they're peers and they're talking, but it's like, oh no, this is just his fantasy. And like, I kept expecting like, oh, okay, but he's gonna break big, and then you realize, oh wait, no, this is a whole other kind of stuff. Like, we're going into dark territory.
I'm like, yeah, Rupert Pupkin is talking to himself. I'm like, I totally relate.
That oh, can I show you my Pride and Joy? And then he shows him the picture, and it's the Pride and Joy detergent. Like, somebody like did that to me, and this was like long before I ever saw the movie. So like, I know, but yeah, it's like, here's my Pride and Joy. So I guess like, I don't know if that was like, if that came from that movie, or if that was like just this like corny bit that like everybody did, and so that's the joke, is like, oh, here's Rupert Pupkin doing this corny stale joke. When like they showed me this, like, oh, here's my Pride and Joy, and showed me the picture, like I knew Joy, like Joy detergent was still around. I don't think I've never seen Pride
anywhere
ever, and I don't know if Joy exists now at all. I don't know if that joke would work at all.
Yeah, I haven't seen Joy like around. Also,
here, can I show you my OxyClean and my and my ShamWow?
Here's my Dawn and Palmolive.
Yeah.
Another thing I see in the films too, like Joy, you see that a lot, but you also, they don't make like colorful paper towels or like pink toilet paper anymore.
Last Temptation of Christ, again, it's like, when you're like a kid and these, like, I was a kid when Last Temptation of Christ came out, and it was like in like Catholic school or whatever, so it's like, oh, there's like this movie and this guy is a troublemaker and he's like saying like mean things about Jesus in his movie. Like that's all I knew about was like as this like controversy of like who's this guy making a dirty movie with Jesus in it.
Well, I knew it from just seeing it in the video store. I'm like,
Yeah.
movie about Jesus. I'm like, count me out.
Yeah, boring.
Yeah, that's why I didn't see it for a long time because I'd be like, yeah.
No, I mean, it was like...
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm like...
Again, it was like one of those... It would be on, like, these, like, you know, trashy, like, tabloid news shows of, like, you know, I don't know, a current affair or whatever, like, was out back then. But it would be, like, you know, these trashy news shows. And they'd be like, you know, they're making a porno movie with Jesus in it. And it's like, well, that sounds bad. Why would anybody want anything to do with, you know, that? And then, you know, and then, like... You know, as an adult, it's like, oh yeah, let me check out this. You know, it's also like I had to get my courage together the first time I bought a Black Sabbath album. You know, and I was like, I was a fully grown man. I'm buying a Black Sabbath, but I'm still feeling this like residual like you know Catholic
perfect for the Scorsese.
You know.
Perfect for the Scorsese episode.
But like, yeah, checking out, you know. Last Temptation of Christ, and it's like this movie's like amazing. Willem Dafoe is like amazing in it. I feel like he brought some of the Last Temptation of Christ gravitas to Spider-Man, as Norman Osborn.
He's like, hey.
But it is interesting for somebody to like play Jesus and play the Green Goblin. You know, so like Max von Sydow, you know, plays Jesus. So it's kind of like a Willem Dafoe kind of.
Oh yeah, I love his look too. I think their heads have similarly shaped heads. Mm-hmm.
And then watching Last Temptation of Christ, it's like it would have been kind of fun to watch a like the movie that they described, you know, that they were protesting. Like it would have been interesting to see this sort of sensationalistic, you know, sacrilegious and all that stuff. That would have been a cool movie to see. But like what, you know, finally seeing it, like what Scorsese made was like a really like sort of like serious and very very like respectful movie too, you know.
Yeah.
David Bowie played Pontius Pilate, and like Pontius Pilate in the Christ story is like that's the juicy role. That's Pontius Pilate is the role everybody wants because you get to be kind of like you get to do a lot of acting, you know. You get to be kind of like and sort of you know, you're the one with agency. Like you're the one who sort of has to make the big choice and you know and fail, you know. It's Pontius Pilate. I guess Pontius Pilate and Judas are like the two meatiest roles.
When I was little, that VHS box like a million times.
Like, do you have any recollection of like the controversy surrounding like were your parents kind of like, oh, you're not watching that, or like
that was just,
oh, that's a bad movie.
That was just another like when I like the first Scorsese movie that I probably like that was on my radar was probably Goodfellas.
Yeah.
From my cousins.
Okay.
And like Last Temptation of Christ, I would see we would get those Columbia House things.
Yeah.
Where you'd have like I was obsessed with them. It was the stamps with like the VHS box.
Yeah.
And you get the thing in the mail and you get like a whole sheet of stamps.
Yeah.
That you could
they were like little peel-off stickers.
And I would obsess with those. And then for some reason I thought the Back to the Future was like the Karate Kid. I'm like, look, he's on my dress on the front of it. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, but I would just stick those like, and I would see they had the Last Temptation of Christ sticker.
Yeah. I think they blew it. Like I think you know. Like our Catholic school, like I think all the teachers should have like gotten behind Last Temptation of Christ. They you know maybe sold some you know some Last Temptation of Christ folders in the school store. Like I think they missed out. I know that they invested heavily in Michael Jackson folders. Like they bought a lot of Michael Jackson folders to sell in the school store, and then like Michael Jackson like went out of style like the very next year, and so they just had stacks of these Michael Jackson. While we're talking about Scorsese controversies, you know, there was like recently like a really dumb Scorsese controversy where it's like he said that the Marvel movies or like superhero movies aren't cinema, and then people are like, what? Oh no, you know, people like really lost it over that, and it's like, you know. I don't know.
Take it, like relax.
Yeah.
The great director like Spielberg said something controversial too, or I can't remember.
I mean, if like Martin Scorsese can't say, these Marvel movies kind of suck. Like if he's not allowed to say it, who can? It's like come on, people.
Yeah, Spielberg's
I think he's earned the right to shit on whatever movie he wants to shit on.
Spielberg says like something about like the Marvel movies stink, or like Netflix isn't true. Like watch the movie. It's like I think Spielberg's made probably every movie good that you like.
Yeah, right. Maybe you don't agree with that particular sentiment, but it's not.
I think he has a right to say something like that, even if you don't agree with it.
You could argue the merits of that position.
Yes.
Even if you don't quite feel that way yourself. Your avatar is a character from one of his movies, as you're shitting on him for expressing an opinion like okay, yeah. He has strong feelings about what cinema is or isn't, or should or shouldn't be. And that can be. And you're shocked by this.
Yeah, like the guy that's like into preserving he's
preserving film frame by frame,
painstakingly trying to keep film alive, and they're like, oh man, did you hear what Scorsese's?
Scorsese, he's like another one of those figures where it's he is a film practitioner, but then he's like a film historian, a film fan, like a film student. Like he never stopped being a student of film. What's next for Scorsese? I know he's got everybody's project is being postponed or whatever. Like, does he have something in the can? Is there something he's working on that got delayed or?
Yeah, I think it's called Killers of the Flower Moon. I think it's based off a book about
cool title.
It's really cool. It's about land. I think land dispute.
Okay.
Like these
There Will Be Blood kind of thing.
Yeah, like a families, people that landowners being murdered, and it's like the dawn of people investigating it. It's maybe founded the beginnings of the FBI maybe.
Okay.
And I think it might have Leonardo DiCaprio in it. He was attached to it at one point, but another project was the Killers of the Flower Moon was it was going to be a movie. I think it's going to be a series.
Based on the title, I was getting kind of excited that maybe he's making a space opera, because that's
that's so cool.
That's the genre I like, that I would love. I want Tarantino to make that Star Trek movie or whatever, and Scorsese was making, especially after Hugo and doing a trip to the moon, or the first men on the moon, whatever that movie was. I'm doing Killers of the Flower Moon. It's these guys, they go to the moon and there's all these flowers there and they kill people.
Yeah, it's the ship has arrived at Alpha Centauri. We're thawing the 5 families out of cryo freeze.
They continue their multi-generational gang war on Alpha Centauri now. It's gone from New York, New Jersey, Vegas, Reno to Alpha Centauri. Yeah, watching The Color of Money, there were some musical cues that showed up in Goodfellas or Casino. It was interesting seeing an early version of the same kind of
that is
stingers and stuff.
Color of Money. I haven't watched that for a little while. Mm-hmm. Now that you're bringing it up, I'm getting excited to rewatch.
It was interesting watching it from the perspective of Scorsese's body of work, because I think probably most people sort of just watch it as here's a fun 80s movie, and when you watch it on a streaming service, the things that are being recommended aren't other Scorsese movies or other great director kind of. It's okay, you like this, watch Porky's now. It's other 80s kind of.
You just watched Rain Man,
right.
Barry Levinson's Rain Man. Now we recommend Color of Money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or it was recommending Officer and a Gentleman. So I'm thinking they didn't have Top Gun on this streaming service, so it's okay, here's the prequel to Top Gun, or
hopefully if I'm screening Officer and a Gentleman, hopefully Amazon recommends me the Iron Eagle series. I think he was attached. I don't know if it's going to be a movie or a show. It was The Devil in White City or something. It was Leonardo DiCaprio was attached to that, and it was he's like H.H. Holmes, that guy that had at the World's Fair, like a murder hotel or something. Would like lock people in like airtight chambers and like have weird like secret rooms and stuff. And I don't know if that's still happening or not, but he was attached to that at some point with Leo.
For like Star Wars, it's like George Lucas's wife Marcia, who was like, you know, a very talented editor and you know, responsible for making Star Wars as great as it is. You know, like it was one of those movies that was kind of like really, you know, maybe possibly saved in the editing. You know, like she was going off to like edit something with Scorsese, and like Lucas was like afraid that like Scorsese was very like I don't, you know, that's Scorsese. He's gonna try to like make a move. I don't know about this.
I think he had like Goodfellas. I think Scorsese had like a devastating cocaine habit too.
Yeah, like Scorsese, like, you know, he talks very fast, like, you know, like and the characters he plays in his movies like talk even faster, you know. So it is that like that cocaine cadence.
Goodfellas is like the biggest
allegedly.
Oh boy, Goodfellas is like the biggest PSA, like anti-drug PSA.
Yeah, but like anti-drug PSAs, what they've sort of learned about anti-drug PSAs is that they probably had the opposite effect.
Oh yeah,
that they basically were advertisement for drugs, because you kind of you're putting it on kids' radar. It's like, oh, drugs, sounds interesting.
Yeah, like like in school, it's like the folks, you never heard of any of these, and the guy's like, he's like, all right, kids, stay away from yellow zippers and like blue blasters. It's like, what the hell is that? It's like, never heard any of these. Thanks for putting them on my radar.
You know, it's like the Beatles, like when they came to America, like one of the things, like there was like this brief like news story about the Beatles, talking about like, you know, oh, here's some like, you know, shitty music from England. And it was just like a 2-second clip of the Beatles playing, you know, talking about what garbage they are. And then it's like, they say like that's like what was responsible for starting like the Beatles craze in America, was like, you know, kids seeing those 2 seconds and being like, I like that. Let me see. So it is, you know, it can backfire. You know, you're it's like, you know, here's what happens when you take drugs. Interesting.
Interesting. I'm like, do a little Booker Sugar.
Yeah, I mean, because you know, like you know, like Henry Hill in Goodfellas, like. You know,
what I got from that is
you'll see helicopters.
Yeah,
take this. You'll see I'd like to see helicopters.
I was just gonna say, you know what? Maybe it wasn't an anti-drug PSA. It was a sensory enhancement.
Yeah, you know, and that guy in Goodfellas, the Pittsburgh connection. You know, living in Pittsburgh, it is kind of, you know.
So many like there was in Taxi Driver. The parents of Jodie Foster's character live in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What's some place that Jodie Foster can be from originally, which is why she ran away from home? Pittsburgh. That's like, you know, we're talking about like, yeah, beating people with phones and stuff. And I think Joe Pesci, like in Casino, beats one of his henchmen with a phone. And I think there's like there's like a scene in Casino, or I mean, there's a scene in Goodfellas where like. Robert De Niro is like holding a phone like menacingly. Yeah. He doesn't hit like maybe with like Maury's wigs or something. Like he's like holding a phone in a very threatening way with Maury.
De Niro does some of the best phone work in movies I've ever seen. Like he like in Taxi Driver, he's like, you know, his phone acting, like he's like, they always say like know your props and stuff. He does great. Like he talks on the phone so good. Like in Heat, he's like, there's a dead man on the other end of this fucking line. And then, like...
you know, the ending of Taxi Driver, I mean, like, what do you think of, like, the theory that, like, Travis Bickle died in that shootout, and then the sort of happy ending of the story is, you know, his, like, last thoughts before he dies, or, you know, like...
I was trying to... The last time I watched it, I was, like, trying to figure out where it, like, transfers from, like, reality to dream. And I was trying to... And then, like, yeah, when he's, like... Yeah, when he gets shot, I guess, yeah, he...
I mean, like, how do you read? Because like, I I always like just took it for granted. Like that like, oh yeah, this is like the surprise ending, that all this horrible stuff just by accident ends up having like a good outcome. It I like the thing of it being his last thoughts as he died. Like, I think that was pointed out to me. Like I read that somewhere.
I never made that connection till like you said, till I read it somewhere too. I still think it, like, when I watch it, I think it's like that, like the ending with like the letter stuff happens.
Like it's that's
I mean, what I think.
The thing of it being a drink kind of like creeps in, and I always kind of wondered if like the ending of True Romance, which like also has like the same kind of happy ending. Like I know Tarantino's script. Mm-hmm. It like they die at the end.
Yeah.
And Tony Scott made it a happy ending, but I do wonder if like Tony Scott's happy ending is kind of like a reference to Taxi Driver, where it is like, okay, they did die, and then this is their this is like heaven, or this is like their last thoughts as they died, and like that ending also kind of echoes like the ending of Carlito's Way, where he is very clearly dying, and his last thoughts are like him and
Penelope and Miller, like
on a tropic island to get like enjoying their life, with the waves coming in. Like that's the ending of True Romance. So.
That Carlito's Way ending. Oh man, I like get so choked up at the end of that. Benny Blanco
from the Bronx,
like that's another PSA for. Should always treat everyone. Everyone like.
Yeah, it's be kind to the people you meet on the way up, because you're going to meet them again on the way down. Yeah, be kind to the drug dealers you meet on the way up.
Yeah, be kind to the criminals you meet on the way up, because you're going to see the criminals on the way down.
Yeah, a De Palma episode would be interesting. Yeah, you talk about like your cousins showing you, like Goodfellas when you were a little kid. Like for me, it was like my dad showing me. De Palma's showing me Scarface as a kid,
Yeah, like
those mob movies appeal to like an adolescent part of the male psyche. There's sort of these like adolescent fantasies and like power and like sort of like having like a fuck you attitude and so. And I mean the funny thing, like they can be aspirational. Like people can sort of like watch them and just like. Enjoy the sensationalism of them and kind of disregard like the moral of this, because like none of these stories end well,
Like, you watch enough mob movies, like you thought that you were out, but they
keep pulling you back in. Like The Sopranos kind of had like the last word on that genre, because you watch the story and again you do get this like this like thrill of watching people do bad things, and then you do like kind of start to identify with the Tony Soprano character, and then like in the final episode they kind of remind you that, oh wait, he's a sociopath, and there's nothing redeeming. And and all the
he's a terrible kid.
They kind of like really put that in. It's like when Dr. Malfi is, looking up through the series, you think that Tony is kind of like getting better, like he's getting closer to some kind of redemption or whatever, and then you find out that like, oh, this is what sociopaths do in a therapy setting, is that they kind of just play the therapist. They kind of like charm the therapist and like put on a show for them, almost as practice for the show and the charming that they do in the real world to kind of get what they want, and manipulate people. So, and that she and the viewer had kind of been manipulated too by this person who plays people, and kind of lets you know that like, yes, there's nothing worth emulating in any of these characters,
Connection to Goodfellas, Lorraine Bracco.
Yeah.
bridging the gap
Yeah.
into the Sopranos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can kind of like make a career finding your like place in like the mob genre, you know.
Yeah, and then James Gandolfini from True Romance
Mm-hmm.
too. Like Spielberg was extremely close to doing Cape Fear,
Mm-hmm.
like so close. And the let's see.
It's interesting. Like, I'd love to know like what Scorsese did, you know, with Schindler's List in the pre-production. Like how far did he get into that? What kind of, you know, what you know, what little bits and pieces of what his Schindler's List would have been.
His I believe his Schindler's List was just, he didn't have any like start any work on it. He was just like planning that for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like I think Spielberg, like if you check the credits, like you'll see like Kathleen Kennedy like is one of the producer on there.
Yeah.
She's like pops up throughout like Spielberg's stuff.
Yeah, Kathleen Kennedy is, you know, she like became Lucasfilm, like when, you know, she was like really like running Lucasfilm, and then when George Lucas sold it to Disney, she's the person who like is sort of bridged that transition from Lucas to Disney, and still running Lucasfilm within Disney.
I can't wait till we
do our Kathleen Kennedy episode?
Or like we get you know, hopefully we get into a Skywalker Ranch.
do like the Skywalker Ranch expose. we could use our press credentials maybe to get a tour of Skywalker Ranch. You know, we could start trying to see what you know, push, you know, get, you know, try to get some access.
Yeah, I think he worked with De Niro at least like 9 or 10 times, and then Leo is 5 or 6. But if he gets these other projects, Leo's creeping up, like, his filmography. He's got De Niro in, like, almost all of his movies.
De Niro kind of needs Scorsese, because left to his own devices, he does some shit movies, you know?
Was it, like, Bad Grandpa? Or, like,
Dirty Grandpa.
Dirty Grandpa. It's like Irredeemable Pap or whatever.
Is that a real term?
I just made.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, Irredeemable Pap, because it's got the double definition. It's Pap like Grandpap, but it's also like Pap like a shitty movie. The Aviator. You got anything to say? I enjoyed The Aviator. Aviator feels like one of those like one for you, not a one for me.
Yeah, like it feels like the you know, I like The Aviator too. I'm a fan. But it feels like somebody could, you know, he wasn't like vibing on that, and somebody had to bring that to his.
I mean, I think he gets enough of his obsessions in it, because it is it again is about film to a certain degree, and you know, Katharine Hepburn is a character in it.
Great, Kate Blanchett.
Golly,
I've been thinking about this for 5 years, and I'm finally getting to make it where it's like maybe an executive was like, The Aviator, like.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of like, so The Irishman is like the Jimmy Hoffa movie, you know, and then like Howard Hughes is kind of like another one of those figures where it's kind of like, you know, they're kind of like sort of larger than life. You sort of know them, you know, for like maybe some like a very specific couple. Like Howard Hughes, you kind of know as like, oh, he's this guy. He was like super rich and powerful, and then he became a nut. You know, he became crazy. You know, and walked around with no shoes on and blah blah blah. And had his fingernails grow super long, and you know, and then like Jimmy Hoffa, it's like, oh yeah, he's this guy, and then he got buried in you know, Dodger Stadium or whatever it is. Yeah,
on Jack Nicholson, Hoffa.
Yeah, you know, I wonder if like Scorsese like saw Hoffa, the movie Hoffa, and it kind of like stuck in his craw, like, you know, like that should have been my movie, and you fucked it up, and I was going to do a Hoffa movie, and so you have to like wait a bunch of decades to do his, and does like a stealth Hoffa movie. It really is.
Yeah. Like Hoffa, was like either 90, 91, or 92, and that was another one. Like all these movies that came out when I was like really young, it's like the trailers and their promotions like are burned into my head. Yeah. So like the Hoffa push, and I think also with The Departed, he had to like, I don't think he had worked with Jack Nicholson before.
I mean, The Departed was a remake. You know, it was like how Cape Fear was a remake. like how The Color of Money was like a sequel
called Infernal Affairs.
Infernal Affairs. Cool title.
Yeah.
That's cool. Like that sounds like a very sort of like genre, kind of like trashy kind of thing that would fit with like a Cape Fear or Shutter Island.
That's a great
Infernal
title.
Affairs. Yeah.
And there was that like a current affair.
A current affair. Well, that's where you would see like stories about the Last Temptation of Christ, or stories about how like the Power Rangers are gonna like melt your kids' brains and make them turn them into like violent.
Was that Maury Povich?
Maury Povich, yeah, that's where he got his start.
And Connie Chung.
Connie Chung had nothing to see. Connie Chung was like a legitimate like CBS news person. And then Maury Povich was like, trashy tabloid stuff. So it was kind of like, oh, he's the bad boy. Like she fell in love with the bad boy. Yeah. Like Maury Povich would have been like a half step above Morton Downey Jr. In fact, A Current Affair might have been like on like right before the Morton Downey Jr. show, the Robert Downey Jr. show. Imagine if they swapped careers. Morton Downey Jr. would have been a good Tony Stark.
Yeah, we just dipped our toes into the Scorsese pool.
Yeah, genre and like his attraction to like the crime genre, and so it is like, I mean, this is what like stories are, and like the earliest stories and the elemental appeal of stories is kind of like, yeah, just like people doing bad stuff. Like we want to hear stories about people doing bad stuff, and like he knows that like that's the appeal. Comic books. Like the earliest comics, were like crime stories, and the genre like really like comics really, got big when they like embraced crime stories, when you'd have sort of like the EC comics where it's all about people like murdering each other and where you really like where the criminals are the protagonists. So it's like this is an old tradition that kind of gets the human animal. It plays some kind of it speaks to us in a very elemental way, like it's like lizard brain stuff.
Works cut pretty deep.
Yeah, and when you get analytical about it, that's when you're kind of like, oh, what these characters are doing is not only illegal but immoral. But it's like that part of your psyche doesn't care. The part of your psyche that just kind of like plugs into like a work of fantasy, or just doesn't. Go get your shine box.
All right.
That go get your shine box thing is kind of interesting because like. When somebody says to somebody like, go get your shine box, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm telling you to F off and telling you to go get your shine box, but then kind of forgetting what happened to the guy who told somebody to get their shine box. The guy who got his shine box came out of that situation okay. It was the other guy who ended up in the trunk of somebody's car, stabbed multiple times. And then kind of like sat in there while
they had spaghetti.
And looked at Martin Scorsese's mom's paintings and made did some art criticism. How great is Martin Scorsese's mom? Anytime she shows up, it's great. And then you kind of like start spotting her. It's kind of like, oh, there's her voice. She's the voice of Rupert Pupkin's mom in The King of Comedy.
She's awesome. And the food in his movies looks so good. When they're cooking in prison in Goodfellas, like when they're shaving like that garlic with the razor, I'm like salivating.
Yeah, and the sausage. I mean, the movie that like redefined the crime genre and specifically like the mafia genre or whatever, The Godfather. And it's like there's the one scene in The Godfather where it's like, hey Michael, let me show you how to make sauce. And it's like that was like the scene that launched 1,000 ships. It's like, from that you get like all of Scorsese's like food scenes
and then
Tarantino. Yeah, it was like that was like the breakthrough of that was like cracking the code of like the crime movie is like adding the food. And especially like the mafia, like sort of the Italian mafia is kind of a relic. It's a thing of the past. Like it's but it's like when people think about organized crime, that's what they think of because I think because like the food's so good.
It looks great. Like those guys sitting around in Mean Streets. They keep the guy who brings out. He's like, "Are you ready for the next like the beef course or the seafood course?" And I'm like, "Oh my god!" They got the sparkling water. It looks
like Italian cuisine is the world's cuisine. Get your shine box,
right.
and then let me show you how to make some sauce. And make sure you cut the garlic nice and fine with a razor blade.
Before, was I cut it too thin? What did I need?
You were cutting it too thick. You got to cut it so thin that it liquefies in the pan.
All right.
You've been watching the Martin Scorsese episode of Total Recall. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics.
And I'm Matt Zeoli.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli.
You can follow me on Instagram at cinema_tune.
And I have a Patreon, and you can check it out on patreon.com. Just search Tom Scioli, Scioli.
And I have an album out called Around Forever, and you can download and listen to that at santamiravideo.bandcamp.com.
And you can follow the show on Twitter at Total Recall Show or on Instagram at Total_Recall_Show. Okay, we'll see you next time.
We'll see you. Yep.